So you went from an environment where there was a lot of love, a lot of affection, a lot of support. Then you came up here to total strangers, and basically, yeah. And then you were told you had to stay. What was that
right? And you got to
like?
realize,
Yeah, because
and
that's
so it's good
good.
that you said that because remember I told you it's
Yeah.
all women, and I was closer to my mother's side, so I grew up in the bosoms of
Mm,
women.
okay.
When my mother's looking for me to whoop my butt, I had somebody's dress to go run underneath and hug somebody's leg. Right? I was spoiled by all my aunts.
Mm,
So I left and my grandmother, oh gosh, we lost her in COVID. My grandmother and I were super, super close, you know?
mm,
And so yeah, I left what I would call no, my only family experience and environment
mm.
to have never seen it again, Cami.
Wow.
To have never, to this day, to have never seen it again.
Wow.
And so what was your question about?
Yeah, yeah. I was just saying,
Yeah,
like, what was
sorry.
that? What was that going from this supportive environment to one where you barely knew people and then you just had to adjust? Like, what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, that's a big
It was,
change.
yeah, man, it was rough because I was dealing with a couple of things at the same time. You know, when you graduate from school in Jamaica, like 16, 17, it's
Yeah.
not the same as a 16, 17 here. You know, Jamaicans have to grow up fast.
Okay.
So I had some maturity,
Mm.
but it was a shock to move to New York and one,
Right.
be with people who I didn't feel love me, care for me, or was supportive.
Mm.
And I remember thinking to myself, and I ended up being proven right later on. I ended up feeling at some point like it would appear that these people are doing my mom and me a favor. Mind you, a favor I never asked for. But
Mm.
it would appear that they're doing by housing me,
Mm.
and you could say take care of me because my mother, the arrangement was for her to send money from Jamaica to take care of me.
I was just gonna ask you that.
And
Right.
at some point, that money started to dwindle.
Mm.
I was living with my aunt and collecting money from my mom every week or so via Western Union. And I
Right.
watched that money I would collect dwindle from 200 US
Mm.
to my mother at one point sent me $5, $10.
Okay.
So
Okay.
she was staying from Jamaica. At that time, the Western Union fee was like $9.99. She was paying $9.99 to send me $5.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so much of what I was able to eat or to sustain myself, or clothes, or a winter jacket, or a pair of Timberland boots
Right.
came from my cousins or from that aunt. And
Mm.
so there is this thing where I'm seeing that, okay, cool, I have a roof over my head, but I don't feel loved though.
Mm. Okay.
So what is laying underneath it? What's the real motive here? What's going on? You know, why did you offer to do this favor for my mother? But yet still I feel like this is a hostile situation for me.
Okay.
Mm.
So I had to navigate that
Mm.
and then navigate this feeling of coming of age, but I'm like a child.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
here's what happened after 6 months. You know, your visa expires.
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm now an illegal immigrant.
Mm.
After 6 months, I became an illegal immigrant. It was years later.
Okay.
My mother and I had a huge blowout
Okay.
where I asked, none of you guys realized I was going to be an illegal immigrant? That never even crossed your mind in
Mm.
6 months?
Okay.
So that was happening. I'm feeling hostility and tension. I feel like a child because I have no money, and I'm just like, what do I do next?
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I felt alone. And it's not until this conversation
Mm.
that I'm now recognizing that this cocoon I locked myself into as an adult like I'm a soul, like I'm a lone ranger.
I got you.
Mm.
I didn't even realize that I had that feeling from that household until this conversation.
All right. All right.
Right? I thought that lone ranger feeling probably developed as I hit the streets.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. But no, sometimes those seeds are planted from before, I guess.
When you're young.
Yeah. So then once I realized I was staying, the question of school became a thing, because coming here at 17, I still had a year and a half left in high school in the US.
Okay.
Right. So I eventually started the mission of finding a school to go to
All right.
on my own. Right. On my own. Yeah.
Now you you mentioned before when we spoke that at one point you were homeless, right?
Yes, sir.
How did
Yeah.
that come about?
So there are actually two phases of my life where I dealt with that.
Okay.
Right. And so I ended up leaving my aunt's house before I graduated high school, right?
Okay.
So shortly before graduation, things came to a head, and I just hit the streets, right? And I felt like I could do that because at the time I was making friends who were they had support systems, but they chose to be in the streets, like in Brownsville and Bed-Stuy and places like that. Like it just seemed like we could hang out all night at various basements and things like that, right?
Flatbush is like that too.
Flatbush, yeah, man. That's where. Exactly. So I was in all of them places, and so I had left and technically without any set location, going to school, freshening up in school, leaving school, going to another chick's house to go freshen up, that kind of thing, right? And so that was kind of a choice, right? Things came to a head in the household, and I left. And I still had the refuge of school. So between certain hours, I'm at Robeson. I'm the first one there because I freshen up in the bathroom and I need to have breakfast.
Okay.
So I went to Paul Robeson High School. I don't know if you guys remember Paul Robeson.
Yeah.
And I ran track. And field.
Y'all
and
always
so,
had a good track team, man.
Yeah, man. Robeson was a good track team. So I got to school early and I left school late. Yeah. And when I left school, I was living like a grown man, but without no, I was just, yo, where you at? What's going on? Like, are you at 2 First? Are you on Lennox? I'm coming over and I'm there till 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm hanging out. I'm sleeping in somebody's chair, going to school the next day.
Wow.
The next instance is a few years after that. And all of this is without papers, right? Being an illegal immigrant. So a few years after that, after I left high school, I ended up, like working menial jobs. I ended up renting a room close to King's Plaza by Kings Highway and Utica.
Okay.
Lived over there for a while. Okay. And this is how I started to understand how sensible people end up. Because there are no drugs or no, so you got to ask yourself, like, how do sensible people end up in situations like these?